You are listening to a Coalition of Peers podcast, part 2 of Marching Mouths, a panel on peer leadership in the Downtown Eastside. This panel is part of the Vancouver Community Coalition Against Prohibition and Overdoses Beware the Ides of March event series, recorded March 17th, 2020.
Maybe we can speak to that tension as well without having these two crises compete against the other. But the fact that the Downtown Eastside in particular has been in the midst of an opioid crisis, and it's been stated as much since 2016 and by the city of Vancouver, not to say that it wasn't a crisis before that. And now, so what does it mean what does it mean to the neighborhood when there's this another crisis?
Can I chime in here real quick? 'Cause I'm like, there's also a housing crisis.
And
there's also a genocide actively against Indigenous people in the neighborhood. So I'm like, there's all these intersectional. It's not just COVID.
No.
It's like HIV and AIDS. It's like Hep C. It's like, people with COPD. It's like people with cancer. It's youth.
60s, 70s, it was the alcoholism. Downtown Eastside has always been in some type of crisis. That's why we are such strong people.
Yeah.
Because we survive.
Yeah. And I think
John Wayne toilet paper. We're rough and tough and don't take shit from no one.
What I was gonna say is I think kind of to bring it back to Danielle's point, there's all this knowledge in the neighborhood about all of these intersectional issues, and everyone here is way more knowledgeable. You get a nurse that's paid $40 an hour. You get 4 people, you pay them $10 an hour in stipends. They're gonna do 8 times the amount of work, that nurse educator or whoever is doing. So I think just touching on the difference between community knowledge and institutional knowledge is kind of at the root of peer leadership, maybe.
Well, because all they do is they read a book. They're not living it day to day, right? They don't know what it's like to wake up and say, "Fuck, I have no dope."
Yeah.
Fuck, where'd my wash go?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
But-
also, go ahead.
Okay, I'll go. So, and with the nurses and stuff, a lot of the people involved with the community groups down here are now being asked to help with the education of these people. We work with podcasts with them. We've wrote guidelines, for BC Center on Substance Use. We were integral in some of the guidelines we wrote. So we're starting to get listened to, but it would be nice if we could,
The big thing around that too is a lot of the messaging, this crisis has been a crisis for a long time, but it's just a lot of the messaging that goes out there is they read out a textbook and they think that's fine, but it's you're sending the wrong, for instance, there's this new overdose stuff that's coming out called From Know Your Drugs, whatever, from Canada Health, and the one messaging they forget to put in there is the breaths, they just say knocks on someone, they'll be fine. It's no, that's not true. So they're not listening to people that are really that deal with this every day, and people that are experience this every day too. And that's the big thing, is just people need to listen to people that experience either overdoses, housing crisis, and all the different crises, because it's just we're the ones that have the most knowledge, we're the ones that know everything too, because we live it every day. So it's just listen to us, it's easier.
Well, I think this is a big thing too, is the idea that, let's say someone's writing a report, I'm they're stealing that information. What do they get? They get a 3-car garage, they get a swimming pool, they get a, summer home, they get flown across the country. What the fuck did anyone down here get? You get a
gift card.
Yeah, you did Tim Hortons. Yeah.
$10 to tip or Starbucks. It's what can I buy? 2 coffees.
2 coffees, half a donut.
You're I can sit in here all day. Excuse me, sir, there's a 20-minute limit on how long you're allowed,
I'll buy 2 coffees, though.
But I'm I think the fact that there's so much knowledge, even in this room today, and how undercompensated it is. And if you look at the way funding streams go, I'm it's the class system becomes so apparent in the difference between peer, quote unquote, labor and, institutional labor.
Back to the funding thing, where organizers get funding. It seems like if you get a grant or funding of a certain amount of dollars, then you're forced into hiring some friggin' administrator who's going to take a third of that right off the freaking top, which is kind of bogus, and then you got to, use that funding to pay for space to use when there's so many spaces around here that can be used for basically nothing. That's what bugs me about the funding is you got to have that 1/3 for the administrator. And with the city and places like that, we have people, like you say, we have the knowledge in here. And I've worked with groups in the city, and they've said, okay, well, we're going to do this. And I've said, okay, well, you're going to need somebody to coordinate and work with the groups. So what do? Instead of looking at me or Samona or Melissa or anybody else to do that, they hire some book learned moron, you know? So I'm getting angry again. I gotta stop.
But I see like that the person that they hire, it's like
Student.
it's like it could be a student, but it's also coded too. It's like, oh, we need this person to legitimize the work that's being done, which is really disrespectful to the work that's been going on for
Van
years.
been going on forever.
Yeah.
Right. Pure
20
run,
years.
pure lead. It kind of leads into like the whole treatment rehab friggin' thing we got going on here. You go to treatment for 90 days, you do 30 days, you go out on a pass for the weekend. You do a urine analysis and it's got like either cocaine or alcohol or pot or whatever in it. They tell you, pack your bags, get out, right? Well, how is that treatment? Because now you've taken this person, you've taken all their money to live off of for your treatment center and throw them out on the street. Wouldn't, like me, if I was a counselor or somebody, I would say, well, why did you use? What was behind that? You know, like you want to work with the person. You just don't want to stigmatize them more because they're already guilty because they use. We feel that, right? You know, especially while you're in treatment or recovery. And that just makes it tenfold.
Well,
right?
same with youth and care too. It's like if you're youth and care, you get forced into those things and you don't have that option to say no to it. You're into it and you're stuck there and you move away from the city and stuff. It's frustrating.
Well, I also just think there's nothing between abstinence and like whatever your pattern of use is. There's no one that's like, you can use a bit as a treat, you know? And it's like...
There's
well,
no treats for you.
Yeah, exactly. It's either like all or nothing. And I'm like, if you're like fucking smashing drugs every day and are just like rah, 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 blah, 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 like, you know, terrorizing everyone, whatever, I'm like, you should probably slow down. But I'm like being like, your only option is to quit. I'm like, that person's gonna like,
I'm gonna go do more.
yeah, either that or like they're gonna quit for a couple days and then not have any like moderation or understanding of what moderation could look like. And then as soon as, you know, they're triggered and do it again.
We'll discuss that.
And it's unsafe that way too because it's like you're not telling someone how to like for instance like monitoring your doses, but like also they might do like a giant smash because they think their tolerance is down and stuff. Then it goes right away they're down and it's like, well, fuck, that's fucked because you should be telling people like if it's okay to use, but it just like go slowly. It should be going slowly.
Yeah, we don't need recovery from the substances. We need recovery from the trauma and the pain and all the other fucking bullshit that we've gone through. That's what we need the recovery from, to be treated like everyday normal fucking people. But what is normal?
fuck is
Because
normal?
we do
What the
drugs, we're
fuck
never
is
going to be
normal?
fucking
Yeah.
normal, apparently.
Well, I think Al's point is kind of like you should have basic like rights, you know, like no matter how fucked up on drugs you are. Like when I was saying normal, I think what he means is like you should be treated like as an equal
dignity
and
and-
you know with dignity and respect and shit. That's what like that means.
But you use drugs.
Yeah, well,
Well,
yeah,
even just
no
like-
dignity for you.
Yeah, well, and just like recovery can mean that recovery can just mean that you're slowing down, you're cutting down your use, but not like going full sober, not full abstinence, because it's like I'm someone that's able to maintain like using every day and stuff like that. I'm able to maintain myself. That's also due to having housing, but it's a whole different issue. But yeah, it's just like the recovery doesn't need to be full abstinence. It could be harm reduction.
Yeah.
I went to jail for that reason.
Yay!
Well, I did because they told me I had to quit, and I said,
Fearless
fuck you.
leader. Hey?
Yeah.
Same with kids in foster care. If you don't quit, you're fucked.
Yeah.
They either will force you to quit or they'll just lock you up and then you're stuck there for 6
Meanwhile,
months.
after all the kids are in bed and stuff, they're in the back room drinking their whiskey and doing whatever, right?
Only if you're white.
I think just because we only have a bit of time left, I want to switch gears, just have one more conversation. So safe supply, you know, recently I feel like, again, it's just fallen off the map, and especially with COVID kind of suppressing all the events we were running, it was supposed to be like a bit of a kick in the ass. But I'm like, all we've seen like recently, you know, our Tyndall's machine that has an uptake of like 12 people. So
And you need a prescription order to use that machine too.
So for clarification for anyone listening, it's a dilaudid vending machine. So if you have a prescription from a doctor that's willing to prescribe you dilaudid, you can go to this machine and it'll biometrically scan your handprint and dispense you a certain amount of dilaudid pills depending on where you're at in your titration period.
6 times a day.
6 times a day?
Or not 6 times. It's either, it's like,
I think it's 3 times a day
3
to
times?
begin.
Okay.
But regardless, I'm like, this has been the only development in like a safer drug supply.
Except for the hydromorphine program and stuff.
Hydromorphine program as well, the injectable opioid agonist therapy, which happens at Molson Ops, and there's also programs, obviously, at Crosstown Clinic, which is all a spin-off of Salome. Al?
But the injection treatments and all of that stuff, you have to go there 3 times a day. You have to stay there so long before you do your fix, so long after you do your fix. How the hell are you going to keep a job if you got to tell your boss, so I got to leave every 4 hours so you go do mine? You know, it's easier just go into the bathroom, do your whack. Nobody needs to freaking know.
Well, and I think this is like a big question. I'm like, why have there been no further developments, no programs with carries, no like larger scale distribution, no effort to change drug policy or to like lessen sentencing or even create special categories where like drug dealing is okay if you're testing your drugs. You know, the ethical substance use navigators we have in the community aren't protected. So that gives them no incentive to be testing their drugs, to be doing this stuff, aside from their own care and, you know, the things that actually motivate them to care about the community. But I'm like, there are so many policies in place you can change and nothing's getting done. So I'm just curious what people's thoughts are and what people's hopes are around that. So,
well, the one thing I'm going to say is like, yes, weed's been legalized and whatever, but it's been legalized if you're not someone that's colored. Like, if you're like, I know a lot of First Nations people that are still being arrested for having like even just a gram on them. It's still an issue like that, and like legalization's got to happen for everyone, not just for one group of people, and where it's fine. But it's also just like around safe supply too. It's like they're talking a lot about like opiate agonist therapies and stuff like that. You know, and then there's a program that does run for like stimulant users, but you need to be someone that uses down or something like that too in order to get that.
Can I just cut in before you speak, Al, just to address this directly? Because I think what Colley's kind of getting at is unless you have the government grade regulation of the drug in the specific government container with the government stamp and seal, like if you're an Indigenous person, let's say, with a gram of pot in an unlabeled plastic bag and you're like walking around, the cops are still going to roll you and be like, you didn't get this licitly. So for someone who's Indigenous, the same thing with cocaine. Let's say there's a government cocaine dispensing machine, but then I'm like, you're Indigenous and have unlabeled cocaine, they're still going to arrest you on that.
Our auntie just gave it to us. Come on.
Al, you were going to say something about safe supply, though?
Oh, what was I going to say about safe supply?
Well, what's going on right now, and then what the future of it should kind of look like if we had our way?
Well, the whole thing with like safe supply, blah, 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 yada, yada. For one thing, we have to look after ourselves with safe supply. Find a dealer who is consistent. If his dope isn't that good, just do twice as much. But it's the consistency that matters. And when you're out there scoring, don't watch the guy's hands, what he's doing. Watch the street for the po-pos and anybody else coming around. Because if that guy gets busted, you're out there looking for something even you don't know what you're going to get. That's kind of my thing on safe supply. And if you get some poppy seeds, friggin' grow them this summer and make your own opium.
You go.
I just wanted to give you both some space if initiatives that you might be working on right now, and just things that you're also hopeful for in the future, and even in the midst of the situation that we're dealing with right now.
Well, they should just make it like weed and decriminalize it. Like, weed was the gateway drug, so what the fuck's the gateway drug now, right?
Yeah, just kidding.
Back off! You know, like,
We'll fix that in post.
That's we're on it.
We're on it.
I'm trying to be, but you're not going to give you a supply.
That's referring to a set of commercials that was done in the States. Matthew,
South
we're
Dakota.
Go on, Samona.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't care what the cops say, but what's the worst they're going to do? Throw me in jail again? You know, like...
Get to see my brain.
Yes.
No. Yeah, and what? Then they're going to let me out, and I'm going to do the same thing that I've always done. You know?
At least you get good dope inside.
So I get good dope outside, too, so... You know, like, I always make sure mine's tested all the, like...
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, I know.
Melissa.
I don't know. I think now would be like the perfect time for, they would seize this as an opportunity to push for safe supply right now. But they don't see it that way, and it sucks.
Buying drugs should be like going for coffee. You should be able to walk in and get it and walk out.
Yeah.
Nobody
Nice.
fucking, you know. Oh, I don't even drink coffee, but a mocha, and they'll be like, oh, you drink mocha? You know, maybe like,
Different types of
Get
meth,
away
different
from
flavors
me.
of meth. Oh, can I get a cherry flavored, please?
For sure.
And it's just like a big issue too. It's like when it comes to like safe supply too, it's like we need to remember
Safe
that
supply?
you should have that option to have safe supply too, because it's
Yeah.
just like they should have that option, because it's like for youth it's just like, oh no, we need to send them to treatment, we need to send them to treatment, we need to get them to absence based, and it's not. That's not the right way to do it. It's like if they're using drugs already, they're gonna be using drugs, they're gonna do it, they're gonna be hiding it, and that's dangerous too, because if they're hiding it, then there's more options where they're creating more dangerous situations for themselves. So it's like when safe supply comes, we need it to have the option open for people that are.
for everybody.
And when I talk about youth, I'm talking between the ages of 18 and 30, so not anybody that's 11. Kind of funny.
See,
but
I was 11 when I first started smoking pot.
I was 11 when I started cocaine.
I was right when I was doing crack.
Yeah.
Well, I was 8 years old and I was using moon rocks.
Alright. I was huffing gas at 6.
Yeah.
Oh fuck, I was already huffing gas.
But see, and then also them pushing for abstinence is just gonna push them further away.
It makes them hide. It makes them hide their drug use and makes it unsafe for someone. Because like, if you have to hide your drug use, it means that you're probably doing it unsafely. So.
But then they want to do more because they'd be like, oh,
Yeah.
they said I can't do it. Fucking A, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was growing up, my dad said, if you want to drink, smoke, do drugs, do it at home. I was like, where the fuck's the fun in that? So I didn't do any of it. I moved in with my mom. She's like, no, no, no. And I'm like, yes, yes, yes.
It's like basic human psychology
Well,
Yeah.
there, right?
Yeah,
Like,
it's like the risk factor. Like we all fucking take risks. We all like we're gonna climb that tree and we're gonna fall out of it, break our leg. We don't. Next time we climb that tree, we know how high to go.
By and large, you know, there's a lot of lateral violence that's a byproduct of like abstinence conversations. So I don't know. You know, like violence from drug users towards drug users is like pretty frequent. And I don't mean physical violence, like you rip me off.
You're an
of the-
injector, so I hate you. So.
Yeah, you're an injector, or I hate you, or I'm abstinent now and you're not, so you're my enemy, or you need to become
I'm doing
abstinent.
an AA meeting with me, please.
Yeah, or you know, this kind of rhetoric, or even people that might be using in a way where it's impacting their ability to go to work or like engage with people in a way they conventionally used to. Like everyone's reaction is like fire the person, cut them off, you know, cancel them. And I think this attitude of like, because I'm like, at the end of the day, you know, there's only so much money, whatever. Like someone's got to be doing these jobs, whatever. But I'm like, we should be taking care of each other, not throwing each other under the bus.
Yes.
I think I'm lucky in that kind of, because I have jobs where I'm able to maintain my high, but like I'm able to like work at those jobs and also like still use it technically. So like even though I'm not ever use it on the job, but I'm still like because I'm stabilizing myself on my drugs, so I'm able to just like get high before I go to work and then able to work. And just like that opportunity of being honest with my employer too, being like, I use drugs, and also I just did a shot before I came in, just so you know, I might be a little fidgety today. Just letting them know that, and I think that's great to have all that opportunity, but a lot of people don't, and that's frustrating. So it's like if you can't be honest with them about that, it can be dangerous.
My last employer, it was wrote into my contract that, you know, some mornings I might be coming in dope sick, and I'm useless if I'm sick, so I'm going to need some cash, and I could get, you know, I get $20-25 first thing in the morning, go down, score, go back to work, do the smash in the bathroom, and get at her.
I make sure that I don't have a job that I can't use that.
Yeah. If we weren't drug users, we wouldn't be doing the work we're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe last word from everyone in a circle. Let's do a round just to get everyone's voice on recording again. What are people's hopes in the future for drug policy and safe supply? If you could have one project or idea or thing that happened to drug policy, what would it be?
To stop the stigma on meth users, because we're fucking people too, and I'm using messaging to like stop that stigma around it, because it's like we're not dirty people, we're not disgusting, we're not psychotic, and we're not gonna kill people as people think.
No different than anybody else using any other substance. And like, you know, like because I'm on the opiate side of this, it sounds like I'm always, that's my agenda, but that sort of is, but I'm 100%, we need to know more about the stimulants. But it's like there was a thing a couple years ago, like overgrow the government, right? Let's just start growing it. How can they make a freaking plant illegal? You know? You know, it was put here on the earth by whoever put it here. Like, how come some jerk in friggin' Ottawa can say, oh, you can't drink that tea? Well, fucking A, I can.
Well, you're leaving out the chemist, so wait a minute here.
That's my last word.
I think that if you want to do heroin, do heroin. If you want to do crystal meth, do crystal meth. If you want to do fentanyl, do fentanyl. Like me, I hate heroin. Love fentanyl. You know, it's like, who's to judge about who gets to do what? You know?
See, I'm the opposite. I love the heroin because of the high, the sleep, you know.
I fucking hate that.
The first time I did, I thought, oh, this is it.
We must be meth users.
Yeah. You're not normal.
I would like to see in other organizations that they make it mandatory for them to learn about, you know, the other organizations and the knowledge around drug use, so that the stigma stops there. You know, because I think that's why there is so much stigma, is because they don't educate themselves.
We need a community group liaison to work with all the groups.
Or you just make everyone at
Get
every
high.
group, yeah. You're like, this is what meth is like.
Yeah, hot box.
I think my last word on this, and I'm like, you know, people aren't talking about projects or whatever, but I'm like, the ideal situation to me is just like a bulk barn you can go into. Does anyone know, do they have bulk barn in BC? Like
they do.
Big store with bins just
Yeah.
full of drugs, and you take your scoop and you're like,
I
blah,
fucking
blah.
hate it.
But you know,
That's everywhere.
that's my ideal kind of.
That's it. Yeah, you can get
Yeah, but I'm like, I also think like pragmatically, I'm like, the city could easily red zone an area and be like, you go into this building, no one's gonna arrest you going in or coming out, and anyone that's testing their drugs in the building can sell drugs in the building, and no cops on the premise, you know, community managed kind of red zone for drug dealers, because drug dealers in our community, who are the only people keeping people safe, it's not the Mark Tyndalls or the Jane Buxtons or the fucking, you know,
They
any
actually
of
check in with us.
Yeah, exactly. It's the drug dealers that are keeping people safe. So having a place where they can go to be safe, which they do not have right now, aside from like small organizations that are trying their damnedest to keep people okay. Like, we need a space like that. Now you were ready to say something.
I heard something scary yesterday. Some of the outlying communities, the shelters for the shelters, if they see you, people who work at the shelter, if they see you going in and accessing harm reduction supplies, they're not letting you sleep in the shelter that night.
There's only a couple places that are doing that, and it's mostly it's just rumors. But there's only 2 shelters that do that, and they're Salvation Army based. So, FYI.
Well, no, it's just something I heard. So
Yeah.
it's, you know, fear mongering right there, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I like Harris's idea about having a place where drug dealers are safe, because
Yeah.
Yeah.
we're not.
Yeah.
You know, like, we're targeted every day. And you know, if they see you and they think, oh, you just handed them something, it must be drugs.
Yeah.
We need
You
to
know.
with you. Just kidding.
Well, you know, I even have a crazy story about that, where someone I know just almost caught 3 months' time for having 0.9 of a gram of crack flapped up into 10 rocks, and they bought it like that, and they were walking back to the house, and the cop pulled them over, and they were like, we saw you do 2 transactions with that. And they were like, I walked from over there to over here, and I'm going in my house. Fucking book the person, search them, we're like, it's all flapped up, do. And I'm like, 3 months for 0.9 of a gram of crack because it's flapped up, and you saw them do 2 transactions? I'm like, that shouldn't be happening. These kinds of positions, and the police are like, well, we don't arrest people for simple possession. And that's like, no, you don't, because you're trying to get everyone on dealing.
Yeah, right.
You know, possession with intent to traffic.
Yeah. Well, on that is like before, when I used to do cocaine and stuff like that, I remember I used to get stopped quite often, and because they'd sell it in like little tiny baggies, that everyone would assume that I was selling that stuff, and I'm like, I have 10 baggies in me. I'm like, I'm not. It's my own.
Oh, I just bought $100 worth of fucking powder. It's
Yeah.
10, you know.
They
But
do
if
it
you
like
go to
that.
court, they'll say that drug users cannot stockpile their dope. There's no way that you'll have $100 worth of dope on you. If you smoke crack, what you do is you go and do whatever it takes to get $10.
Yeah.
Go buy
You
your
smoke
10
your
rock,
rock.
run in the alley and smoke it, and go and get another $10, and that's how you do it.
We'll
And
kill
that's
someone,
exactly
yeah.
what the judge told me.
Just like we'll kill someone for like a hit of meth or like a hit of heroin and stuff, and it's like, that's not true.
Well, and it just goes to show the relationship between a drug user and a drug dealer are like oftentimes a drug dealer is going to be a drug user, but the way it's used in the court or thought of in the courts is that they're two really distinct entities, and there's like the only relationship.
There's only people that check up on me.
Yeah.
Actually, they text me every day and be like, "Are you okay? I haven't seen you in a few days."
Or the deal.
Hey, coming by or what?
Well, and I'm also just like, what is happening? I mean, we don't need to talk about police corruption. Maybe it's not the most appropriate thing to do on a library panel, but I do think, there's a lot. I'm like, where's all the drugs going? Who's selling them to who? Who's actually getting arrested and on what level? Because I guarantee you, it's not the people that are guilty of mass political collusion that are seeing jail
Or
time.
manslaughter.
Yeah. All right. Well, I'm gonna call an end to this. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Stay safe. Use condoms.
Tuning in.
Just kidding.
Don't forget that meth.
I'm all messed up. So it's become tradition, basically downtown Eastside now. It's after our meetings and our gatherings, to take a moment to think about those that we've lost to whichever crisis happened, or whatever you want to call it, the drug war, the genocide, the colonialization. Take a moment to think about the souls that we've lost, to think about those people in hospitals and institutions who are, fighting to stay alive, and just for the people who are forgotten, that, they're estranged from their families, and, we need to think about them at a moment like this, and this moment's for them. All my relations. Thank you.
You've been listening to a Coalition of Peers podcast.